الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد بن عبد الله النبي الصادق الأمين، وعلى آله وصحبه الطيبين والطاهرين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين، وعنا معهم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Brothers and sisters, السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Tonight we will continue the discussion about the Shari Maxims, but starting from today our focus will be on misapplication of some maxims, and more specifically we'll focus on the misapplication of some of what is called the 5 Shari Maxims, القواعد الشرعية الخمس. Those 5 maxims were mentioned in early books of fiqh. Actually, if anyone is familiar with a book called Al-Ashbah wal-Nadha'ir by Ibn Nujaym, who died in the year 1563, he lists those 5 maxims at the beginning of the book, and then he moves to another maxims. And also, some of them are mentioned in another book of Usul al-Fiqh. It's not printed yet, but it is called al-Haqa'iq or Majami' al-Haqa'iq. Majami' al-Haqa'iq, written by Muhammad bin Sa'id al-Khadimi, and he died in the year 1762. And those 2 books served as the basis for what is called al-Majalla, Majallat al-Ahkam al-Adliya, the Ottoman Majalla. Now, the Majalla, we need to have some background about it, because all of those maxims which we talk about are mentioned also in this Majalla. Literally speaking, Majalla means the journal. But it is actually many books, and the development of it continued from the year 1869 to the year 1876. And we need, it consists of 16 books. Each book is divided into many chapters. And the 16 books are dealing with financial transactions, with the exception of the last 2 books dealing with the evidences and court procedures. It starts with the book of sale, al-Buyu', and then al-Ijara, the book of hire, al-Kafala, book of guarantee, al-Hiwala, the book of transferring the debts, al-Rahin, the book of pledges, al-Amanat, the trustees, al-Hiba, the gifts, al-Ghasb wal-Itlaf, wrong proportion and destruction, al-Hajar, when you take over, when you put limitation or restriction on person's authority on utilizing his wealth or her wealth, and then the sharikat, the companies, the joint ownership, al-Wikala, the agency, al-Sulh wal-Ibra, the settlement, al-Iqrar, the admission, al-Da'wa, the actions taken the course, so actually the last 4, and then al-Bayyinat, evidences, and al-Qada, the administration of the justice by the courts. Now, in order to have better understanding of the Majalla, we need to have some background about the Ottomans, during about the era through in which this Majalla was published. We know the Ottoman state, by the end of its time, it was very weak state. And there is in our history, in the history of the Ottoman state, there is a period of time in which it's called Asr al-Tanzimat, the era of the Tanzimat. It started with the year 1839 and almost went all the way till 1858 and even after that. Now, in this era, there was a conflict also going on between, political conflict between the Ottoman state and some European nations, specifically Russia at that time, France and Britain. And they wanted to start having exercise influence over the state. And the state was under great pressure in order to start some changes in its legal system. So it started, this Tanzimat, this movement started in the year 1839, and then in the year 1858, the Penal Code was published, and then the Majalla was published, like we said, in 1869 to 1876. Now, the Majalla, we said that it consists of 16 books, but the introduction of it consists of 99 articles, which are actually, which are the Shari maxims which you talk about. So it talked about 99 maxims, and then talking about different chapters or different books of fiqh. But like we said, each book is divided into many chapters. Each chapter is subdivided into many articles. The total articles are almost 51 articles, and it is written in a law form. So the law was codified, and actually it served as a civil code for the Ottoman state. Now, when we say civil code, we don't mean civil law versus the criminal law, because here in the US we are aware of the civil law and we are aware of the criminal law. But when we say civil law here, we mean contrary to the common law and to the natural law. The common law is the law theory exercised in Britain and the United States, and the civil code or the civil law is the legal theory practiced in France and Germany, and in some areas in America, like in Quebec in Canada, and in the state of Louisiana in the US. So they did so in order to appease or to satisfy the pressure which is coming from the Western countries. Now, many people who wrote about the history of fiqh were very enthusiastic about the Majalla. Most Muslim theorists looked at it as a sign for a fiqh revival, the beginnings for the modern or the contemporary fiqh revival, because we know that the fiqh went through many stages, and by the destruction of Baghdad in the year 656 of Hijrah, which is around the 13th century, the end of the 12th and the beginning of the 13th, Baghdad was occupied by the Tatars, and the tragedy which happened that is beyond any imagination. So those who are the historians for Muslim legal theory and Muslim fiqh, Islamic fiqh, they consider that year as a landmark in the history of the Islamic fiqh. They look at it as the beginning for the decline, the inhitat. And it continued. The decline continued till recently. Now, some people look at the Majalla as the beginning for the new revival. Actually, it shouldn't be considered as such. Why? We have here a book by Noah Feldman. It's called The Fall and the Rise of the Islamic State. This title has nothing to do with the so-called ISIS. It was published in the year 2008. And it talks about the concept of the Islamic State. Why did it fall down, and how can it be brought up? He is talking, when talk about the first part, the falling of the Islamic State, he addressed this issue in his book, and actually under many titles. It's the Ottoman reforms, and then legal reforms and the problem of the codification. He said at the beginning, this process of codification, he said, let me read from it. He said, I would argue that these legal and constitutional reforms displaced and destroyed the scholarly class without leaving in their wake any institution or social entity capable of counterbalancing the executive as the scholarly class had once done. Why? In the past, his point is that you have the executive or the state, the government, but you have also the body of the scholars. The scholars served as watchdogs over the functions of the state. Yes, maybe they didn't do their job right and complete because they did not function as unified entity. They kept functioning as separate jurists. They should have had functioned as a group in an organized way. But nevertheless, the fuqaha had a lot to say regarding what the government is doing. And if, like we said, despite the fact that they did not do their job very well, and despite the fact that there was misapplication in it. But he said, nevertheless, the jurists served as such. And why? Because if you want to understand the law, you need the jurists in order to understand the law. But now with the codification, all what it ended up with is just a list of articles. And he continued saying that those reforms, they took, he said actually the Ottoman legal codes followed the European models in substance. And he said specifically as an example, the legal or the penal code, which was published in the year 1858, he said it followed the French model. So this is the context within this codification happened. They want to impose their laws upon the Islamic State, but the Ottoman state wouldn't do anything without having a fatwa from Shaykh al-Islam that this is allowed. So it was not easy job. And there were two, let me say, two trends, two groups among the politicians. Some of them are the liberals, and some of them are the quote-unquote conservatives and the traditionalists. So they had this fighting. And then at the end, of course, the quote-unquote liberals succeeded. Now, in the year, like we said, in 1869, they need to codify the Sharia, the Majalla. So they established, the Ottoman state established a committee by jurists. The head of it was Ahmad, I think Ahmad Basha. He was traditionalist, but there are some members, and Ibn Abdin was also from among the traditionalists, but there were some people from the liberals. So basically they took the Hanafi school, and usually they were instructed to take sort of the strongest opinion from the Hanafi school, but they didn't abide by this. They were allowed to look at another, even if it is weak opinion, as long as it is relevant to their time. So basically they took from the Hanafi school, and their two major resources were, like we said, Kitab al-Ashbah wal-Nadha'ir, written by Ibn Nujaym, died in the year 1563, and what his name, Muhammad bin Sa'id al-Khadimi, wrote in his book Majma' al-Haqa'iq, and died in 1762. So basically, those two books served as the reference for the Majalla. Of course, with consultation with some other books. They didn't consult other madhahib, just the Hanafi school. And that after that, it was enforced by the Ottoman state. Now, listen to what Noah Feldman he said. He said, by tradition and logic, Sharia was uncodified body. You know, because what is the Sharia? The set of rules reached at by the jurists derived from Quran and Sunnah. So you have the Hanafi school, you have the Shafi'i school, you have the Maliki school, and each one has many books and contributed to many scholars and many fuqaha contributed to these books. So there was no one holistic codified body. You have books of fiqh from Hanafi school with good diversity even within the Hanafi school. And Maliki fiqh, the same thing, very diverse fiqh. The Shafi'i fiqh is very diverse fiqh. And when they wrote it based on the types of the rules relevant to the time. So they will talk about Kitab al-Tahara, Kitab al-Salah, Kitab al-Zakah, Kitab al-Hajj, and they'll bring it it's not written in a legal form. Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, Article 4, and so on. It's written like you write any book. But they try to write the fiqh along with the evidence. And like we said one time in the history of the Islamic fiqh, at times they start summarizing the books and then writing commentary in some other books. All of this literature constituted the fiqh literature. It was not codified. So the Sharia was not codified as we can see in the Majalla. And he said it was, if you ask someone, where is the Sharia? They'll tell you it is there. Go to those scholars and ask him, engage in a discussion with them. They'll tell you what is the ruling on this, what's the ruling in that, based on this evidence, based on that evidence. And those scholars are linked to the source, Quran and Sunnah. They have to be linked to the source, and the judges are linked to the fiqh, which is linked to the source, Quran and Sunnah. But now, he said, by codifying it in this Majalla, you ask, where is the Sharia? They'll tell you it is there in this book. And that's it. With no link, with no evidence whatsoever. You read the Majalla 1851 articles, no evidence whatsoever to any article. Why is it the law? Because it was codified. And the role of the judge or the legal officer is just to open the book and find the rule and issue the judgment. So, while Hallaq, actually, he mentioned that this process detached people from the sources of Sharia, Quran and Sunnah, even detached the judges from Quran and Sunnah, the sources of Sharia, and linked them to these articles, 1851 articles or so. Now, as we know, we went over the books of Al-Majalla. It's not addressing some other issues. The penal code is addressed in another law. Like we said, it was published in 1858. The family law is addressed in different law, but this one is quote-unquote civic law, talks about financial transactions and the court procedures. So the Majalla is not all positive, although some people like to look at it as positive phenomenon. It included some good things, but without evidences, and it included some other controversial articles. And the other point regarding the Majalla, it was not a natural growth for the fiqh literature, but rather it was a reaction to what the Europeans wanted from the Ottoman state. So it was a reactionary product. Now go back to those 5 maxims. The 5 maxims which we will talk about are al-Qawaed al-Khams. The first one is matters will be judged by their purposes, al-Umur بمقاصدها. The second one is al-Yaqin la Yezul بالشك. Certainty will not be overturned by doubt. The third is الضرر يزال. Harm must be removed. And the fourth is المشقة تجلب التيسير. Hardship must be alleviated and removed. And then العادة محكمة. Here in العادة محكمة we'll find 2 translations. Omar Farooq Abdullah translated to mean customs has the weight of the law. But I found a better translation in a paper published by 2 people from Malaysia, Dr. Adam Abdullah and Burhanuddin Shaiti. Custom is a basis for the judgment. There is difference between saying that custom can be considered as a basis for a judgment, for the court judgment, and between saying that customs has the power of the law. Customs don't have the power of the law. But at certain times, it can be referred to in certain cases, as we will talk about. So, some of these articles are misused and misapplied. And basically, I'll talk about the first article. Matters will be judged by their purposes, al-Umur بمقاصدها, how it was meant to be, and then certainty, and then the al-'adatu muhakkama. customs custom is the basis for the judgment. Now these articles are not new, because some people try to say that some of these articles are new and they are coined recently to justify the changes in the Islamic law. Actually, it's not quite the case, as we see that Ibn Nujaym talked about them, mentioned them, and Al-Khadimi also mentioned these articles. So it's not something invented by the Majalla, but rather they existed before the Majalla. And they are not just Hanafi maxims, especially those 5 maxims are actually also maxims accepted by the Shafi'i fiqh. And regarding the first one, al-Umur bimaqasidha, you read matters are linked to their to the purposes. You'll read 2 applications for it. The first application is in the ibadat, and they tell you to distinguish the ibadah from the customary usage, you need the niyyah. So what's the difference between someone washing his hands and between someone making wudu? Is the purpose. Why are you washing your hand? Are you washing your hand as part of the wudu, or are you washing your hand as just for personal hygiene? Are you fasting because you have next day lab test, or are you fasting because you are tomorrow is Ramadan, or tomorrow is Monday or Thursday and you want to fast the Sunnah day? So this is the first application. What's the difference between Fard and Sunnah in the Salah? Is the niyyah. What's the difference between, as an example, Hajj and Umrah? It's the niyyah. Almost the difference of some issues, with the exception of some issues, the major actions of both Hajj and Umrah are almost the same. The tawaf around the Kaaba and the sa'i between Safa and Marwa. Of course, with another difference that you can do the Umrah at any time of the day, and the time of the Hajj during a certain time. But as an example, in the Hajj, do you want to have Hajj alone or Hajj and Umrah? It's the niyyah. And so on. So this is the first area in which this maxim is applied. Second era in which this maxim is applied is in certain cases in some transactions. As an example, if someone tells you, I am giving you this as a gift, but he meant it to be a loan. So should we look at it as a gift, or should we look at it as a loan? This is now more sophisticated. Did he mention anything hints towards his intention that it's a loan or not? What are the customs in this case? Is it known that this person usually gives free gifts, or when whatever he gives, actually he looks at it as a loan? So here you have also the purpose behind the gift. Certain crimes of, let me say, homicide. We know the first degree murder has its own definition, but we have some other types of homicide crimes. Some of them will be determined by the purpose. As an example, you are going for hunting and you are aiming towards a deer. You want to shoot at an animal, aiming for it, and suddenly someone came up from behind the tree and he was shot down. So now are you liable for first degree murder? No, that was not your purpose. That was not your intention. Okay? Or you are just trying to be training on aiming, and you don't know that there are people there, then that's not first degree murder. But the judge will look at certain issues, one of which the tool which is used, and number 2, he will ask you, why did you do it in this, in order to classify this first degree murder or not. So there are applications for this maxim. But the way this maxim is misapplied, it's that it ignores the actions, whether they are right or wrong, and they'll tell you as long as your purpose is good, then that's fine. That was never meant by this maxim. This maxim was never meant to justify everything. Otherwise, ends justify the means, which is not the case. That maxim was meant actually to be applied within the context which we talked about. That's why actually a Shafi'i jurist, when he talked about those 5 maxims in Piece of Poetry, he said, وَالْقَصْدُ أَخْلِصْ إِنْ أَرَدْتَ أُجُورًا. And the qasd in reference to the first maxim. And the intention, make it sincere if you are looking or waiting for a reward. So before anyone is quoting this maxim, we need to look at it. Is it used within the right context or not? But the maxim is right, it is valid, and it's not correct to just reject it outright and say, well, this is a new one. It's not a new one. It had been in the books of fiqh way before the Majalla, like we said as an example. Ibn Nujaym mentioned it and others. Now, very much similar to this maxim, there is another maxim regarding that contracts. Should we look how to look at the contracts? Should we look at the contract from the point of view of the formula of the contract or the intention behind these words? So should we look to the contract through the words of the contract, or should we go with the intention of the contractor? هل العبرة بالعقود للألفاظ والمباني? Should we give weight to alfad and mabani, to the words, to the structure, to the language used in the contract, or للألفاظ والمعاني, or للمقاصد والمعاني? Or should we give weight to the meanings or to the objectives behind it? Some people took the first options, other people took the second one. And actually, I would say at certain times, you look at the words. If nothing is expressed indicating otherwise. So if you are giving someone something as a gift and there is no indication whatsoever suggests that you are giving it as a loan or as a sale, you cannot later on come to the judge and tell him, you know what, I gave him this, but I meant it as a sale and he refused to pay me the price. So what is your evidence that you meant that it is sale? Did you mention anything even implicitly? No, you didn't. But if you give him something, quote unquote, as a gift, and you tell him, I want something in return, now it's not a gift anymore. Because if you give a gift, it's free gift. If you tell him, I want something in return, then it's not a gift. So now the ma'na, the meaning, the intention is something that there is evidence for it. The procedures, the way you do it, and so on. If you, as an example, give someone money as a loan, and then later on you said, no, I didn't give it to you as a loan, I gave it to you as an investment. Invest, so I want money, I want part of the profit. Now, did you mention this? No, you didn't. With the original words of the transaction. If you mention something otherwise, and you say, you know what, I will give it to you, but based on you make, then it's not a loan, then it is an investment. So there has to be something to indicate that you meant otherwise. So you don't go always, you don't ignore the text always, and you don't ignore the intention or the purpose always. It depends on the case by case, and the judge needs to look at each case separately. So I wouldn't say in the uqud that the weight is given to the words, to the exclusion of the purposes, rather than you say that you just look at the niyyah, at the exclusion, at the intention, rather than the forms, the wordings. So as we see, the issue is more sophisticated than saying, yeah, this is not a maxim and this is the maxim and this was invented recently. No, it was not invented recently. All of those maxims are mentioned earlier, including العبرة بالألفاظ للمقاصد والمعاني لا للألفاظ والمباني. Yes, its application, there are some restrictions on the application, but and at times you don't look at the ma'na at all, you just look at the case of marriage. In the case of marriage, you don't look at the meaning. Someone tells someone, even if he was joking, I'm getting you married from your daughter, from my daughter, then it is marriage. Or if you are telling your slave, you are free, then it is a freedom. You are granted him a freedom. So you cannot say that it is the intention is there. In this case, the intention has no value. Talk about divorce. If the divorce can happen in different ways. If you are not using it, then some schools of fiqh said, well, what do you mean by that? Go and join your family. Did you mean divorce? If you mean divorce, then it will count divorce. If you didn't mean divorce, then it doesn't count divorce. So it's rather we need to have, and by a list, if you have any question. Is there any question, please? Okay. If there is any question, okay. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك لا اله الا انت نستغفرك اللهم ونتوب اليك اللهم اجعل اجتماعنا هذا اجتماعا معصوما واجعل تفرقنا بعده تفرقا مرحوما ولا تدع فينا ولا بيننا شقيا ولا محروما والعصر ان الانسان لفي خسر الا الذين امنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.